Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes possible when we truly stay committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hylke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, episode 45. Today in Phoenix and Finland, where we connect people more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hylke Faber, and I'm here today with Tuula Rytila. Tuula, how are you today?
Hylke, I'm great. I'm excited to be on the show with you and very curious about, where this conversation will lead us.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it. Before we have the conversation, I'll introduce a little bit about the podcast and also about Tuula. So the Rooted and Unwavering podcast is to help us to connect more deeply to ourselves, to each other, and to our purpose. And I was in India last week working with leaders and teams, and what I noticed was how similar we are. Similar in our magnificence and our strength and our wisdom and our potential, and also similar in the ways in which we limit ourselves with our fears and our limiting beliefs. Somebody talked to me on the way home about the state of the world, and the person said, "Fear always wins." And I paused and I thought about that. And I think fear often wins if we let it. Rooted and Unwavering is about taking a stand to actually transform those fearful thoughts and come from a place of courage, of values, you could say love, and practice that at work as leaders and in all aspects of our lives. And I speak from personal experience that is a daily practice, because part of our nervous system, definitely part of my nervous system, is not having that. And is always wanting to go back to the tried and true, you could say, the limiting parts. And this podcast is about learning from people about what is it like to actually make that journey from being a wind vane almost to our conditioning and being more rooted in what's actually true for us, who we actually want to be. We're on this planet for such a short amount of time. Who do we want to be? What's most important to us? Well, what's most important to Tuula, from the way I know her a little bit about her, is she's a very inspiring, values-based role model, positive change leader. She comes to us today as currently a board member of various corporations, including Bang & Olufsen. I was actually so happy to know about that, because that was my first luxury item that I possessed. I had my husband always says, "Oh, that's that CD player that you could not let go of." That beautiful piece of equipment. It's a beautiful equipment that they make amongst other things. And she was also a leader, recently a corporate vice president at Microsoft. She is a person that is all about positive change, and she believes this happens when everyone feels empowered to achieve their full potential, and that our sum is far greater than the parts. She is recognized as a change maker, a force for good, and she loves challenge, whether it's to grow a business, transform a trajectory, change culture, improve performance, doesn't matter. She's got so much experience as a business builder, P&L leader, chief marketing officer, transformation leader globally. She actually speaks 6 languages. She's operated and scaled direct go-to-market strategies and drives new business models. She's known for so many things, excelling in operations and increasing revenue. And she does that through business model innovation, improved customer experience, data-driven operations, intelligent tooling and automation, and enhanced business policies. She is at home in the world, both in the US and in Europe. She's a sought-after mentor and coach, and her passion is advising and giving back, focusing on psychological safety and the business case of inclusion. And besides all of these things, I have gotten to know Tuula as a person who is deeply introspective, and is very curious about life and how to help us to make the very best of that. Tuula, tell us more about your experience and what have you learned in your life and leadership about connectedness. Let's start our conversation there today.
Right. Connectedness. I love that topic for your series here, Hylke. And of course, what comes to mind immediately is how connected am I to myself, and how easy it is to lose that connection. Every moment is an opportunity to somehow, drift away from who you are. So staying centered, is very important, and I use various practices for that. So if I'm connected to myself, then I feel I can have a connection with others as well. And I think that to me is foundational when it comes to connection. And I love that, in your intro, you took us to India and fear, because I think this fear of connection is so present in a lot of human interaction. And at the same time, we long for that connection, and at the same time we're afraid of it. So it's kind of like a big paradox. So I think every time, if I've overcome that fear and reached out, let's say in a conflict or in a situation that's challenging, I can't remember a single incident where that would not have been rewarding. People respond to connection, but often you have to be the one to take the first step. And I think that, if you realize that here's a need connection, if you're the one who realizes it first, it's your duty to reach out and do that connection. Like, don't wait, because the one who realizes it's first, that person is accountable to do it.
I love that. The one who realizes it first is accountable. And since we're talking about us, that means us. And I think that's actually a very liberating and empowering thought. You said something almost by way of passing, which I thought was so important, which is to connect to somebody else, we first have to be connected to ourselves. It is such a simple thing to miss.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about your journey in becoming more connected to Tuula. How did you start off? And tell us a little bit about your life, because you've got so much experience behind you. Like, tell us about that journey.
Yeah. So I think it's almost like a fundamental question. Who am I? I think it's a really good question to be asking ourselves every now and then. Who am I really? We all have very many different roles. Am I one of those roles? Or, in this situation, for example, I feel like I'm also a leader who wants to share their experience. But I think, I've lost the connection to myself. Sometimes, for shorter periods, sometimes for longer periods. And then that moment of reconnecting, is important. And how does that happen? And it's a little bit like today I meditate a lot. So I do daily meditation. So I have an opportunity to reconnect with myself every day. It wasn't always like that. And, I really started daily meditation only when COVID happened. And that for me was I had done yoga and things before, but that to me was a decisive moment in terms of, facing a lot of fears. I think, COVID forced us to pause and live in a potential fear for many years. So then somehow taking it day by day and really presenting us with a choice. Like, how did we want to live through that situation? And for me, I actually, by my daughter's example, I found meditation. And at first, it felt like I had been disconnected from myself for a long time. And I connected to somebody inside that maybe was a young girl and was a spirit, and, was something that felt very familiar and felt like coming home. And also, felt like, wow, like, where did that person go, and where did all the time go? And it's not that like I was in a dream state for the past, 20 years or so, but life happens, and you get busy, and I think that meditation became such a critical tool for me that I now even trained to be a meditation teacher. I mean, I'm not teaching anybody right now, but I wanted to deepen my practice and to have that. But I think truly being in connection with yourself is something that it's not necessarily present in our everyday life and can be gone for a long periods of time.
Yes. I'm very struck by you saying, yes, I connected more deeply to myself as I went into meditation practice at the onset of COVID. And it's not like I was living in a dream state the 20 years before. So tell us a little bit about, we'll talk about meditation in a moment. Before meditation, tell us about what was your experience of connecting to yourself and being disconnected to yourself, especially as a leader, because you've led so many people in your life. So tell us about that. Can you give us maybe an anecdote or a sense of what you learned about that?
Well, I was at Nokia for 15 years. And of course, as a Finn, that was a great place to work. We went through so many interesting technology cycles. And it was all about connecting people. I mean, it was truly, everything was about connecting people. We came up with this idea that instead of calling a room, you could call a person. That felt like a big idea at the time. And then we spread the idea that, hey, like many people in the world would appreciate that, and made some forecast that even 20% of the world's population could have a mobile phone, and, we're laughed at. So that was kind of like early days of technology. And when I joined Nokia, it was truly kind of connecting people. So that was my purpose in the company. And a lot of us, we're working towards that purpose. So of course, connection was a big part of what I worked for. And I think then, connecting, becoming a team leader, connecting with my team, really trying to create these environments where, people could be at their best. And I'm not sure if my early days, if I had that philosophy, and it was maybe more than just you kind of, I had great leaders. One of them, took me through coaching training. So early on, I became a coach, and I learned that it's not powerful to always know the answer, but actually give, the other person space to come up with the answer. And that, I think that coaching method, learning that was huge. That was somewhere, mid-career where I got access to that tool. And then, Nokia went through hard times. I got more responsibility. There was a lot of, there was this feeling of responsibility that was very strongly present, at a company in crisis. And, you connect with your team for a common goal, and you create kind of uniformity, energy, action through that common goal and purpose with the team. But I think, at Nokia as well, we had this leadership model, which I think is still relevant today. It's really simple. It's, lead your business, lead your team, lead yourself, like a triangle. And I don't use so many models necessarily, in my leadership, but that model I loved. And that, that was in the 90s. And this idea of also leading yourself, that spoke to me. So for sure, I had tools. And I think this kind of self-awareness was something that I was trying to catch myself, when I wasn't at my best, or, I was led by fear. So, being self-aware already then was important. And then when we were acquired by Microsoft, it was a huge change, and, switch from Nokia brand to Microsoft, and lots of emotions and all that thing. I felt like I really needed to be an example for my team. So leading myself in that situation was, getting curious and courageous about reaching out, and the Microsoft side, and taking care of the team. So I think in all of this, there was this feeling of responsibility, and that gives you pressure, and not necessarily that relaxed mindset where you connect with yourself from a place of, let's say, no expectations or, possibility or presence. So it's you feel like you don't have that space or oxygen.
Yes. So what I hear is that at Nokia, and then later on, as you acquired at Microsoft, you had this model of lead business, lead team, lead self.
Yeah.
You became fascinated with this self-awareness, when I'm at my best, when I'm not at my best, when I'm, driven by fear, and then also feeling this sense of responsibility to help your team achieve a purpose. And what I find interesting is that as a leader, we often have to integrate, to straddle creating the space like a coach does, like you talked about, for the connection with that deeper spirit, you could say, what you talked about in meditation. And at the same time, we're in the fire, So now that you've done some meditation for some years, and you still have sizable responsibilities,
right?
You don't just show up at board meetings to say Om and everything's great, So how do you integrate that? How do you integrate that meditative awareness, spaciousness, and being in the world and having responsibility? How do you do that?
Well, that is the question. Like, how do you do that? And how do you stay present, that you remember to do that? Because, like, we all have good intentions that, we'll do it. We read a wonderful article and, we think that, now next time I'll show up great. And then you kind of forget it. But it is kind of some even kind of practical tools about how do you stay in the moment? How do you, definitely control the crocodile, the ego. And I use techniques like just thinking about 50-50. To me, that's a great concept, that, I'm 50% in myself and 50% in the situation. I love to be 100% in the situation, very engaged. And then Here I go, like, forget to breathe. And, I'm maybe tensed and just physical signals, your body is not so easy to fool. So, like, why are my hands in the fist? I was supposed to be 50-50 here. And breathing, I think, is a really great tool. And, just remembering to breathe. If I remember to breathe and I'm kind of, part of my attention is focusing on that fact, it's really hard for me to not be at my best. It's very simple tool, but we could use that a lot more.
Yes. Somebody taught me it's simple to be difficult and difficult to be simple. So this breathing is such a simple tool that is easy to forget. And yet, when we are paying attention to it, we stay grounded. And maybe we are more at the choice how much we are in ourselves and what percentage we give to the outside, and how do we balance that?
Yeah. So it's a conscious choice versus a reflex. Yeah.
Yes. Like, okay, let's take a moment. It's like when you were speaking, I actually started taking a deeper breath. So it's interesting. Just so hearing somebody else talk about this is a great tool as well. So tell us, in business, in leadership, in teams, we tend to have conflicts and disagreements.
Yeah.
So how do you work with that and still practice this 50-50 that you talked about?
Yeah. I think earlier in my career, I avoided conflict. I wasn't comfortable in conflict. And I don't know, I probably used many techniques to avoid it, which I don't want to teach. So, but I think it wasn't something that, I enjoyed or looked forward to. It was like a necessary evil of, being an executive and getting more responsibility. There is conflict, often internal within the company, or there's budgets to fight about or whatnot. I think then I learned the better approach, which was really to embrace the conflict in terms of, wanting to create a better outcome. And and it's really important to separate the people from the topic you're discussing. And there was this, this I think he's Danish professor in Berkeley, who has this concept of fight and unite. And, there are many ways people talk about it, like say it in the room and, outside a line. But in my team, we started to talk about, this was my Microsoft team, we started to talk about fight and unite. So how would I facilitate a conversation where everybody was heard? And especially those people who think differently from me, like it was very important for me to hear them as well. And then, have all cards on the table or all points expressed, and then jointly like look at it and, decide what's the best way to go. So that, I think, this kind of fight and unite is, let's make the conflict visible. Like it's a good constructive conflict. If we have different opinions, maybe we're not thinking this the best possible way. Like, how can we make the best decision? Let's hear all the arguments. So I think embracing conflict is one thing. The other one is also like giving in at the right moments. I've noticed that if I show generosity and I can give in, other people mostly respond the same way. That if I can be, let's say in a budget discussion, I can say like, fine, like I can give in here. People will, that generous spirit will catch on. So I'm not actually going to lose. I think everybody's going to win. So I think this, like the true win-win can happen in conflict. Creativity can happen in conflict. So we should not be afraid of conflict. But we should treat each other kindly, but try to look at the things from different perspectives, and that's fine. So maybe we need to find a better word than conflict, because like conflict is like war and these horrible things where we're not looking for a common outcome. So the conflict at workplace, we need to reframe it in a way that what would we call it when actually different opinions, it's really diversity, isn't it?
Yes. I love
really
that
diversity, and then it's like for the best outcome.
Yes. I often talk about it with teams as going from conflict to confluence, coming together of streams. And I love that you talked about fight and unite, because often, and this was my experience when I started meditating. We reach these very peaceful states, and this joyful and buoyant and inspiring, and everything so kind and nice in a way.
Yes.
And then we have to have a budget conversation with somebody, or make a tough decision, or say no. And how do we do that grounded in that deeper energy? And what I hear you say is we do that by creating the space, like being that space where we can say it's okay to fight.
Yes.
And we're doing this for a purpose, to unite, to make progress. I also love that you talked about being generous in that, being generous in that. So you have, in my view, you've had, and you continue to have so many responsibilities, right? You're also a mom. You live in different countries. You have all these board positions. You contribute to the community. You do so much. How do you keep it all together? Or how do you keep yourself balanced? How do you do this?
Well, firstly, I'm paranoid that I'm not doing enough. So it feels like, I don't know, I'm paranoid that I'm not doing enough. Did you say in the opening that, or was it in our pre-conversation when you said that we have this life, this wonderful gift that, at least right now we're here on the planet, and who knows what happened before or after. And, you feel a little paranoid that are you doing what you were supposed to do, and, enough, and all of those things. So that then, the paranoia side and actually, calming down is important as well. Is, I like to plan. That's not, that's not going to happen. Not happen. I will plan. And I think every working mom who has a career and is a great planner, because we all, we want to have it. I don't know if you can say have it all, but we want to have many things, and our kids are always the first priority. So we become good at planning. But I also, now that I don't have the pressure of, the day-to-day grind as a corporate executive, I like to leave space for surprises. And I got really good mentoring when I switched from Microsoft a year ago to this more like a portfolio career with boards and other things, that, don't rush into things, allow things to happen naturally. So I think things are happening naturally. So some things are coming and some things are going, and you kind of like, if you trust the flow, there will be some flow to it. And then there are some things that I want to ensure that I get done, and then, make those a priority. Prioritization is important, because then you don't lose sight of what's important. But today, like, my priority is that I have enough time to, do my yoga or do my meditation, or think, or go on a walk, or just have creative thoughts. So that my priorities now includes things like space.
Right. Prioritizing space. Isn't that something? Prioritizing
Yes.
space. Sit with that for a second. Prioritizing space, giving ourselves space. So
yeah, like your calendar can't be programmed 24 hours.
yes, giving yourself space. So as you have been doing that, what have you been discovering about yourself in that space? You already talked about more flow and things appears. What have you been discovering about yourself as you've created more space? And as you think about that, I want to just bring something in, because I can imagine people listening to this thinking, well, that's an easy thing for her to say, because she's no longer on the treadmill. So she can easily create space. She's not retired, but like that. But how would you think about creating space? What does that give you? And maybe how can that also be useful for somebody who is still, let's say, in the midst of it, like that, that is still in their corporate careers, and they actually have to be in it for financial or for ambition reasons or whatever.
For sure. Most people. Yeah. And I agree that I'm very privileged, and that I get to now plan for this space. And that if they think like that, they should. And like, thank goodness I realized that I can do that, and I'm grateful for it. But I always, like I had this fascination into neuroscience when, I was working at Microsoft. We did so much work for the culture, and we worked with neuroscientists, to create our leadership principles. And I mean, you have so many wonderful, highly intelligent engineers at Microsoft. So, you better bring some science when you want to drive change. And so, like, I learned a lot about, neuroscience of insights, and things like, giving yourself space when you're working on a hard problem. Like when you've defined the problem, give it a little bit space and time, and distance yourself for it, so intuition will come. So I've noticed now that when I have more space, I listen to my intuition more, because intuition is basically, it's weak signals, and it means your neurons, the billions of neurons that are making connections all the time, they haven't made that connection. It's a weak signal. So, because it's new. So you have to allow space and attention that you notice them. So we learned that, and I share this with my team all the time, and would practice it myself, that walking under trees is really good for your brain. So people need to take breaks and maybe have walking meetings, or, into the schedules, build time where they feel like that their brain has time and space to renew itself, because it's short-sighted not to take care of your brain. And of course, people are more busy at different life stages, but 20 minutes or that, maybe that's too long, 5 minutes of meditation, everybody has 5 minutes, and it makes a big difference. And it won't happen, the day one. So there again, you have to allow it some space, but it will start happen quite quickly, that you notice that actually you might have more insights. You might be listening more to your intuition. You might be less worried or less anxious. And these small signals can grow into bigger things. And actually, one thing that I've noticed is that I am more grateful. It's easier for me to find things that I'm grateful for. And like I have all kinds of things happening in my life right now, so it's not that it's all like wonderful and roses. I mean, there are real challenges. I have aging parents. My father is in assisted living, and all kinds of things. And but I'm more grateful than ever. And I think my personal situation is maybe in some ways tougher than ever. But I'm not sure if those things are connected or not. Maybe yes. Maybe if you are really into a tough spot, then one way to, I don't know, survive might be too strong a word, but to make the most out of it is to really, be grateful about those things that you can be grateful for.
Thank you for sharing that, Tuula. We're going to take a break in a moment. There's so much that you've been sharing that I will take with me. The 50-50 self and situation. We always have 5 minutes. Create and take care of your brain and create space so you can listen to the weak signals, After the break, I want to hear more, Tuula, from you about what you've been discovering, maybe from the weaker signals, as you've been doing meditation more regularly, and also how that's helping you to face some of the challenges in life. Because every human being gets through those, and you alluded that you have some. And I think, welcome to the rest of the 8 billion people in the planet. We tend to have all challenges. Like, how does meditation and how does becoming more present and creating more space actually help with that? We've been listening to Tuula Rytila, who is a board member of multiple companies, including Bang & Olufsen, also a former corporate vice president at Microsoft, very much positive change leader, and recently also becoming a meditation teacher. We are going to speak with you and listen more after the break.
You are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Rooted and Unwavering. So happy to be here today with Tuula Rytila, and we're speaking today about your experience with connecting with self so we can connect with others, and also this prioritizing space. And don't wait until you're almost dead or you're retired. Do it right now. Yes. Always, I'll do that. It's always fun when I walk in a graveyard and I see all these signs, rest in peace. Like, okay, why do we wait until we are under the ground? Well, the body's under the ground to think about that. Maybe we want to be in peace already. So what have you been learning?
That's so well said. They will for sure rest in peace. We don't need to be worried about that. But what about us?
Right? Can we walk in peace no matter what's happening? So, question, how have you been listening to the weaker signals in your own life? And what have they been telling you about you and how to be with what's happening in your life?
Well, firstly, I must say that, I have enough of a scientist in me, even though, I studied economics, that I needed to understand, what the heck these weak signals are. And so I got very interested in neuroscience at Microsoft. And then I did this one certification in neuro leadership, recently. And really what I learned about the brain is that we have about 85 billion neurons in our brains. That number we can't even imagine. So it's more than you can imagine. And they're constantly making new connections. So for sure, we are all different because that, if you think about how many ways you can be different, there's quite many. And this weak signal apparently is something that it's a new connection that's not been made yet. So you have to be maybe a little bit like inwardly focused, like in a meditation, to spot them, or somehow, walking or whatever is, like maybe it's showering or driving, whatever it is for anybody, that they get their brain to be somewhat active, but at the same time rest. And this psychological safety that we talk about a lot in the workplace now as well actually means that your brain is not under strain, like your brain is in this space, state. And what I've learned about myself, well, it's a good question. I mean, I feel like I am more connected to who I am really, my spirit. I think that's if you would ask me who am I would probably, nowadays I'm asking that question quite a lot, from in my meditation. Actually, it's part of my meditation process. Like, who am I? And it is an interesting question to be asking yourself, like the most basic question. But you come to the answers of something like, in the end, you're a spirit. And I think, if I'm thinking about my purpose, what is my purpose? How can I serve myself and others? I think it's really like being true to that spirit. And I think you said role modeling when you talked about me. I want to be a role model for positive change, and that it's never too late. And there are always things that we can work on, and somehow there's so many unnecessary things that, yes, the human condition is not simple. And I think the world is in a lot of trouble, and, the fear is definitely there. But I think there's also so much, unwasted potential where we are just not focusing on the right things. We're focusing on the competition between ourselves or whatever is the problem. And we're just like not noticing the things that are so, fundamental, wonderful, and important, and like connection, and doesn't need a lot. Like you can just smile to the person next to you in whatever line you're standing, or, say hello. I mean, these things sound very small, but actually they matter. They can be life-changing. I've heard many examples where they actually are life-changing. So how can that spirit, if I live my true spirit, it's kind and loving, and how can I let that shine and penetrate everything I do, whether it is in a boardroom, making a tough, prioritization decision in a boardroom, for example. It's not that those decisions are easy, but you can do them in a way that that you're more aware of what is the right thing to do.
Yes.
When you are connected to yourself and your spirit and your purpose. I think it's really hard to, you will make mistakes, and God, but you have a better sense of, when you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. That sense of connecting to myself. I'm listening to myself. You call that listening to my soul, my deeper essence. And that deeper essence is kind and loving. And I want that to permeate everything that I do. And it's like the way I hear that is, when you have something very beautiful in your house or in your yard or in your life or in your book or in your head, you want to share it. Like if you have a really beautiful piece of music, you want to share it with others. And similar with the realization of who we are, there's a natural draw to want to share it. That's part of its nature, you could say, that we want to share it. And the way you spoke about it is, it's like it helps me to be clear, or clearer. I love the humility in that,
Yes.
not God. So, but the humility in that, So what do you do when you're in a space, let's say a meeting, or situation, or maybe just a situation in your personal life, in your head, that seems very problem oriented, right? The newspapers are full of problems. Meetings can often be problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, problem 4, end of meeting. So how do you work with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really important to recognize that, hey, we are now in the meeting, with the tough topic. Like, recognize where you are, and then think about like what's useful or helpful in that moment. And if it's a kind of a tough situation, needing to, let's say, make difficult decisions, it's the way you do these things matter. I mean, you still need to do the tough thing, but the way you do it matters, and you can always be kind. I mean, tough and kind are not opposites. Actually, sometimes toughness is kindness. When that's needed, clarity is kindness, and when it's a clear no, that's kindness. I mean, those two things are not at odds. So the how becomes very important in those situations. I think the how is really important. How do you treat people with respect? Everybody wants that, and everybody deserves it. Like, how are you respectful in those situations? And that can be kindness.
Yes. So what I hear you do is you intentionally remind yourself what you are and what you're about, which includes being kind, and earlier in the podcast said being generous. So also being able to say, yeah, I will agree to that. And being clear, all of that, bring all of these things. And so what do you notice in yourself? Maybe the contrast that you may notice in yourself when you are maybe an old brain, let's call it old brain.
Yeah,
I like to call it crocodile, but like the old conditioned brain, which is problem, like that.
Yeah.
And or like very demure can be, right? Or frozen can be. Versus this soul infused thinking and doing. What's the contrast for you?
Well, it's it's much more creative, and it's not this yes or no situation necessarily. Like, you see more options, you see alternatives, you see maybe a roadmap, whatever can be helpful in that situation. That this is a tough moment, things will change. It's really funny. Like, I had this wonderful manager at Nokia at one time. He was a very experienced sales leader, and he told me that somebody had sent him an email, and he didn't respond yet, and then they call, and then like, I sent you that email and you haven't responded, like, and the person was very much in panic. And this guy is like laid back, experienced, and I think kind in a way that makes everybody else relax as well, and just yes, I saw your email, and I think tomorrow I will read it, and then maybe the day after I will respond. And I, then to me, the learning was, I always say to my team is that, hey, next year we will have different problems. So most of these, situations that are so life-threatening and difficult, they will change over time. So it's the current situation. We have to deal it with the best way we can, with respect, and not undermining the hardship or the trade-offs we need to make. But it's not going to be the end of the journey, because then next year we will have different problems. So I think that kind of perspective, perspective is helpful in that situation.
Yes. I see you infusing, if I call that, as a spacious perspective. Like it creates space.
A good term. Yes.
It's like you create space for more perspective, which then also takes care of the survival lizard brain wanting to, being in this panic of survival. Why have you not responded to this? And as opposed to, this like that. And I think that's a wonderful tool for all of us who may be faced with the challenge, just to notice that energetically. How am I relating to this? Am I relating to it as, oh, I got to get through this, and it's going to be good or bad, and there's those two options, and it's going to be painful. That's very like constricted, versus, let's bring some space to this and maybe see it more as a discovery, is what I'm hearing you say. Like, see.
Absolutely. I often say that let's give ourselves a little bit more oxygen, that so the spacious discovery goes well with that.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing, what comes to my mind is, you talked about like sharing joy, and hopefully people will catch on. I think the other one is also asking help. And asking for help has not been easy for me. That's something that I'm still working on, learning that it's okay to ask for help. I think, seeing leaders vulnerable is really important for people. And I've noticed that when I've said, for example, publicly that I don't know something, people actually have found that inspiring, because it's not necessarily so common for a leader to admit that they don't know something. So I think also, sharing the hard things, and connecting with each other over, I need help. This is hard for me. This is where, I'm really struggling. And inviting a connection to that, is really powerful as well. So people respond very well to helping, actually, if you give them a chance. They might not offer it, but if you request it, people can be very generous.
It's almost reminding people what they're made of when you're asking them
Yes.
for help. Like
This human connection. So it's sharing the great things, but it's also sharing the need for help.
Yes. What do you have to overcome in yourself to ask help? What do you have to overcome, you, Tuula?
Well, I mean, I wonder, it's somehow maybe this idea of being perfect or being the helper. And I think one of my friends then, once said, or maybe it was my daughter, I learned a lot from her, that but then you love to help people. So why don't you give them the opportunity to help you? I mean, you're kind of like, not giving them that chance. So isn't that kind of, are they allowed to get the joy of helping as well? So I think this idea of perfection that I definitely don't have, but also allowing to be weak and vulnerable. I think that somehow it's maybe has to do with trust, that you trust, trust the other person with your vulnerability.
That goes back to what you said, I think, in the very beginning, that we have this innate fear of each other.
Yes.
And we have to overcome it. Right.
Yes.
And asking
then
for
the
help.
other person has it too, not only you. And I think that's always a surprise.
Yes. Overcoming that fear of each other by actually asking for help. How does meditation or becoming more familiar with who you are help you in saying I don't know, or asking for help, or being more vulnerable? How does that help you?
I do think it reduces my ego for sure. I mean, I think the corporate world, ego is a big driver, and it's not that ego is all bad. Maybe ambition, it's probably needed. A lot of great things have come out of human ambition, but I think sometimes our egos, get in the way, and I think somehow putting your own ego into perspective and maybe letting go of some of it, and not realizing that can be something that it's very harmful for connection. Being more aware of that, and being able to let go some of it. I think meditation can help with things like that, for sure.
Let's stay there for a second, because I think that's so foundational, that as we create more space, which we do with meditation, we become more aware of what we are, who we are, and we realize that our separate sense of self, which we can call ego,
yes,
is not all that we think it is, and we are not all that. It's a part of our consciousness somewhere. It's a way to call that something, or that separate self something. So as you're on this journey, Tuula, about like discovering more of what you are and who you are, what do you wish for?
Well, I think my first thought was world peace, and that's kind of like a big thought. But I think true to this theme of the podcast, probably this human connection, that we could connect with each other as humans. And we are all, none of us is perfect, and then maybe that could be something that unites us, that we can connect in our humanness. I mean, we're designing these almost perfect machines now, so the human role will change, and for us, we will be always emotional, unlike the machines, So connecting on a human level is something that I wish that would happen more. And for sure, like I can role model that myself by connecting with myself and people around me, or even broader on a media like this. And I think that kind of human connection is what we need.
Mm. What would you say to somebody? It totally resonates, by the way, what you just said. What would you say to somebody who's just not feeling it today, who might be totally in problem land?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Well, I would say learn to be gentle to yourself.
Mm.
So start thinking about what self-love would look like. How are you kind to yourself? Because all of us, we have good in us.
Yeah.
Everybody, all of us, and all of us, we need each other. So it's interesting. I volunteer on this crisis helpline in Finland. I was trained by the mental health foundation that runs it, and people who call there is they are of course professionals who answer these calls as well, but many of the calls are attended by the volunteers, and many people are lonely. I think that's the big problem, where people who call there, people are lonely. They are yearning this human connection, and I noticed that my role is to listen, and the only goal is for the person who calls to be heard. So that's the only thing that we're asked to create, an environment where a person is heard. And I noticed I often ask them if they have somebody, and when they have somebody, just even one person, it makes a difference. And it's incredible to notice how even one person makes a difference. So I for sure want to be that person, to anybody that I touch. But if you don't have that person, if you can start being that for yourself, that would be huge. And then hopefully by daring that, maybe dare another connection, because there are people out here who also want to have that connection.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So start with, appreciating that you want connection, that there's something good about you. Even when you're feeling challenged, remember there's something good about you. And
all of us.
And that all of us are good, basically good. And
all of us are lonely at some level.
At some level.
Yeah.
All of us are good. It's a t-shirt. And all of us are basically lonely.
Yes, exactly. So let's try to help each other.
Let's try to help each other and be here for each other.
Yes.
Be here for each other. That is maybe also something that meditation helps with. Meditation, the art of being there for yourself.
Presence. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, presence, I think, is a big gift of meditation. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. So much you've been sharing. We're miraculously always coming to the end of our podcast with you today. So many takeaways. The things that strike me very much that I will take with me for the rest of my life are this 50-50. What you just said about, remember, you can always be kind to yourself. And that's very important. And then the power of creating space for new perspective, for transformation, for new ideas, for creativity, just creating space. And I sense that that's what also you're doing as you're listening to the people on the helpline in Finland that you're working with. What is your closing thought for today, Tuula? What's your closing thought? What would you like to say by way of closing?
So I think, Hylke, I think this podcast you created about connectedness, it's hitting something really relevant, in our time. And I thank you for creating this platform and this space. And I think for me, it was a great reminder, to just foster those connections. And sometimes it might be inconvenient, sometimes it might cause some fear, but then taking the first step and daring to be on that journey, it's important and it matters. And when we do it, when we all do it, it starts to create a critical mass. And I think this critical mass of people reaching out and being there for each other makes a difference. So I definitely want to be part of that, creating that critical mass.
Talk about positive change, being there for each other, creating critical mass of people who are there for each other and who are connected and or who value that. And realizing that there's parts of us that might get afraid, and that's okay too. And that's okay.
That I think is part of it. I think fear, it can be a good ally, but it's not the end state. It can, recognizing that, hey, I'm sensing fear now. It's a good signal. Like, okay, what's going on here? And that's very interesting. So we don't need to be afraid of fear. We'll just, we'll need to recognize it and, not let it stop us from doing something. Because if I'm feeling fear, it's probably I'm onto something.
There's something that's important to me that's calling my attention.
Yes.
It doesn't mean I should stop right now.
No.
It doesn't mean I might create some space to be with that. I might want to create some space to be with that and really let that in.
Yeah.
Tuula, it's been an honor to sit with you and to actually feel the space that you are creating, that you are in your life, and how you're integrating that with all the things you've been learning, and now also and sharing that with others as you do. So it's been a true gift to sit with you and learn the lessons of being spacious, prioritizing space and kindness, and realizing that space may be kind. Maybe space is much kinder than we think it is. Maybe people are much kinder than we.
Maybe yes.
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. So, thank you. So this is our conversation today with Tuula Rytila, who is a very passionate leader, person, positive force for good. In this podcast, even I learned some other things she does besides board roles and previous corporate positions. Now also working in mental health volunteering in Finland. Wow, there are so many things. What I took away from today was a lot about spaciousness. And maybe if you're listening, think about that. What would it mean for you to prioritize some spaciousness in your own way? You don't have to do meditation. If you want to do it, great. I find it very helpful. Not everybody does, and that's okay too. How would you do that? How would you take a walk, listen to some music, talk to a friend, take a deep breath, whatever it looks like. Listen to some music or be in your body. Be in your body. If you like these kinds of conversations and you find them helpful, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple and Spotify. They're also on LinkedIn Live and on YouTube. This was our 45th episode of Rooted and Unwavering, and we will be doing our next one in a couple of weeks. And until then, I hope you found something today that resonated with you, that maybe has you feel more spacious on the inside and kinder on the inside and the outside. You've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. I'm your host, Hylke Faber. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast, connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hylke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hylke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.